Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. Helene flooded many people out of their homes in western North Carolina. Many more are trapped with roads closed, no power, no water, and no way to communicate. This is the reality for thousands of people in our state after the storm that claimed the lives of more than 100 people across 6 states. WRAL has a team of reporters in places like Buncombe and Watauga counties as recovery begins. One of the first to the area was WRAL's Shaun Gallagher. He's here in the studio with me to talk about what he saw in those first couple of days. Shaun, thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when were you asked to go out there, and what were you expecting to see for covering a storm like this?
Yeah, so last Wednesday, I think we were given a heads up that they would want me and photographer Kurt Tremper to head out there just to, cover a storm. I mean, I think that's all of us in this business are familiar with that, right? And so we headed out, late Thursday morning, maybe early afternoon for, the 3.5, 4 hour trip. Got there and, when we're on the ground there talking to people about, their preps, everything felt normal. Kurt is, he worked in Florida for like 2 decades.
Yeah.
He's, so I'm hitting him up for questions on like, what should I expect? I grew up in the Philadelphia area, but I worked in the Midwest largely. So I've never really covered a hurricane, professionally. So he's just like, lots of wind, lots of rain, that kind of thing. But what happened in the next 24 hours, he had never experienced. And that was shocking to me. Just like it wasn't just rain. It wasn't just wind. It was flooding that I don't think anyone's seen in at least a generation. And I'm not somebody I'm not hyperbolic at all in this job. That is a pet peeve of mine with news in general, if we were to kind of break it down. I don't over-exaggerate.
Right.
This was incredible. I was blown away at what I saw on Friday afternoon, Friday morning.
Yeah, and so do you remember, was there a specific moment where you kind of realized, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be or what anyone thought it was going to be?
Yeah, as soon as we got back to Biltmore Village, Biltmore Village is where we were at on Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, where we talked to a guy who owned a historic building there, and he was setting up sandbags that were, maybe knee high. They had boarded up their windows, things that you typically see on the news from the coast, and we're very far inland. And when we got there Friday afternoon, I couldn't recognize Biltmore Village. The water had overtaken the streets like what I would imagine the rivers in the Grand Canyon or somewhere like that, like white water type rivers, is what I was seeing in these streets. And, they were streets that we were walking on less than 24 hours before. And, luckily it is an area that's largely businesses. There weren't a lot of homes or anything there. So, I was able to detach myself a little bit from like what's going on and just in awe of what I'm seeing. But, we were trying to get as close as we could as possible. But, I think all of us here, news or government or anything say, be aware of how quickly this water can move.
Right.
It's faster than you can imagine. There was a point where Kurt and I pulled into a Starbucks parking lot. The water's kind of lapping up at the beginning, like where you would pull in. We pulled around. And we were out there. We did a live hit. We did a look live hit, like kind of recorded hit. And maybe 10 minutes later, it was at the wheels of the car.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where you're looking at the water where you think it's coming up, and you forget that it's behind you. That you need to not be outflanked by Mother Nature, really. That it feels like you need to have your head on a swivel at all times. And that's where it's just so important that I had Kurt there with me, because I'm so focused in on what we're trying to do to inform people. He's focused on getting video, but we need to help each other to, take your eye off what you're doing. This is happening. We got to move.
Right.
That happened probably 8 times in an hour that we had to, pick up and haul it out and get out of there. And some of the things that we saw in the water are what are going to stick with me. At first it was like garbage cans, it was almost comical at that point, because you're like, oh, there goes the trash, like, haha. But then I saw a dumpster a massive metal dumpster get moved. And it was like, whoa, like this is really impressive. Then we saw a Buncombe County ambulance that was stranded and the water was up to the windows. I feel confident that there was no one in there. I wasn't able to confirm that because we saw firefighters over where it was and then they left. I would imagine they wouldn't have left it if there was somebody in there.
Sure, right.
And then the things that we saw coming down, like the streets that are now a river, just massive like trailers that would be on a train, like those shipping containers.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and like just other large like fuel tanks and things that like it just really put into perspective these things that are multiple tons being moved like they're children's toys.
Right. And that was something when I saw the aerial images, seeing these big trucks and like construction equipment on its side like that. It's the same thought of the way that it was just moved, looked like a toy from the air. I remember on Friday, we were in continuous coverage for several hours as that storm was moving into the Raleigh area. And I remember seeing your live shot in the noon hour. And at the very end, I think Renee or Chris, one of them asked you a question. And you were like, I can't hear. You were messing with your phone. Is that the moment that you lost cell phone service for an extended period of time, as many did?
That's when the lights went out, really.
Okay.
That was when, we have hiccups in this business, but that was when, it really started for me because we tried to get in touch with people back here to, try to troubleshoot what was going on because they were still getting our footage.
Right.
But I couldn't communicate. I would try to call and it would just immediately say call failed. I tried multiple people, call failed. Somebody would be able to get a hold of Kurt, or, we had another crew out there, Willie Danley and John Rector. One of their phones would work and we'd talk to them and be right in the middle and it would just cut out. And at that point, I don't think any of us were concerned at all. I think that we were just trying to make deadline. You're still in a work-focused mindset.
And you're still thinking, again, like during storm, like phones dropping out every now and then, normal.
Not abnormal at all.
Yeah.
And so we're just focused on like, we got all this content that we need to get. Like, so, all right, we're not able to communicate with them. We don't know if they're getting our video. We're still going to gather. So we interviewed a bunch of people, that were like everything you'd expect. This is, I'm in awe. This is terrifying. It's devastating. Everything that you'd expect. So this was, like you said, after 12:15, probably by like 1 o'clock, we were like, all right, John, Willie, you guys are taking over because we had been up since 3 a.m. And then Kurt and I, we were trying to find a place to edit content for the later shows. We did that. We found some other like down power lines and trees, shot some more video that we didn't know if anybody was going to be able to see it or not. And then when we tried to send back our video, we use these things called live views that if people aren't aware, they're essentially backpacks that have every cell phone carrier that you could think of.
Right.
In essence, it's to be able to send video back in a way or in a place that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get a signal. So yeah, your phone may not work. This is always going to work. We've had issues where it's slow and you can tweak it. And it was dead. And I was looking at the live view in Kurt's front seat, and I see 0 for the number of cards that are working.
I've never seen that before.
Kurt's never seen it. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it that bad. And, it's one of those things where I've worked with, engineers who've done this for 30, 40 years, and they're like, yeah, you always need to be able to have a backup, like a satellite truck or something like that, because those backpacks they're not always going to be reliable. And, like, you're like, okay, like, we'll see.
Sure, yeah.
It was the first moment where I wouldn't say I was starting to panic because I was still in work mode, but it was the first time where I was just like, well, we're kind of screwed right now. Like, we can't get any of our content back. I wasn't thinking yet about all of the hundreds of thousands of people who can't get in touch with their families, their friends, to let them know that they're okay. Even more people outside of, this little island that is by the minute becoming more of an isolated island that they have no idea what's going on with them. The moment where it really I was starting to fear for me and Kurt, it was about 7 o'clock at night and
Friday
it was 7 o'clock at night. Okay. And my wife was able to get through to me and she was like, do you know how bad this is? And me, I was like, Kate, like, I'm out there. I know what it's
Yeah,
like, right?
I just saw the dumpsters and
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. And she was like, no one knows what's going on there. And I was like, that's our whole job, is to let people know what's going on here. And if they don't know, I don't know what's
Right.
going on. So like these phone calls that are able to happen are more sporadic than you can think. It's, you could make 10 calls, none of them will go through. You'll get a call in, and then you don't know when the call is going to end. I can't explain why or how, but you just cherish those moments because you're like, I just need to be able to communicate with somebody. So, yeah, like that was the end of Friday. We got back to our hotel that didn't have running water. It didn't have power. We tried to go to downtown Asheville to get something to eat. I hadn't had anything to eat at that point from 3 a.m. on. And, we just had to get the snacks that were at like your typical hotel. So we just kind of fall asleep, 8:30, 9 o'clock because it was pitch black. And then Kurt and I wake up at like, 6:30, 7 o'clock the next day. And, we had a text that made its way through from our assignment editor. And she was just like, all right, this is the plan. Get home, and, that was like, it was a little relieving. But there's a moment where, for what we do, we want to be able to help people. And like, I still feel a little guilty that we just left. But Kurt and I were, we packed enough for 2 days. We didn't bring food. He got a case of water, thankfully. We didn't have extra gas cans. We didn't have, a Starlink or anything to be able to send video back. Our backpack is essentially useless. So there was really nothing else we could do for the people in that area at that moment other than get home to be able to get another crew in there that was better prepared. So, yeah, that was a bit of a struggle. But that next day is when I think, that's when the light panic set in because we didn't know how we were going to get home.
Right. Let's take a quick break right there. Shaun, before the break, you were talking through just sort of, it sounds like it all just, it wasn't maybe one moment of realization of how intense this was. It was sort of like building on each other of like, oh, this is bad. Oh, this is really bad, and so on. So how did you guys eventually get back to Raleigh?
Yeah. So when we woke up Saturday morning, there were maybe 24 people that were in the area for whatever reason. Nobody from any media outlets. These were just people that either, there's one guy who he and his wife left Black Mountain because they were too afraid, and he had a 4-month-old with him. And I'm still sick to my stomach thinking about what they're doing. But he's somebody who I relied on to be like, what do you know about this area? Because remember, we can't communicate, but we can't see what roads are closed. We don't know which way is right. Do we go north and go up through the mountains? Because we don't know that the mudslides, rock slides, and all that the devastation that they were dealing with. At that point, flooding was the only thing that we had really seen that was impressive. Yeah. And we were thinking, if we go to higher ground in that direction, maybe that's the decision. Our assignment editor back here told us, I-40 was not good in either direction. So we just took east and west out of the equation and eventually came up with heading south. That appeared to be the best course of action for us to get out based off, the gentleman from Black Mountain, the other people that we had talked to who had kind of perused around a little bit to see what was up. But at that point, Kurt's car had less than half a tank of gas. We had maybe a half dozen bottles of water, really no food. And we were making a decision that both of us knew, this could be bad. We could be putting ourselves in a worse situation than we are at presently. And you're taking a gamble. I mean, luckily, and I thank my wife for this, I had a saved map on my phone from when we visited Asheville over a year ago. Service in Asheville is not great in the mountains, period, regardless of storms. So we downloaded an offline map from Google Maps so that we knew how to get around in an area on vacation. And I'm not hyperbolic. I'm not going to say that this saved my life. It made our lives a whole lot easier.
Sure.
I was able to see routes and roads that we would have been guessing otherwise. And when you're watching that little arrow on your fuel gauge go down and down and down, you start to get a little more nervous. So we headed south. We took I-26 south to, evens are east. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was in a southerly direction, but 26 east to 25 south. And we saw, lines in various exits. We tried one. We weren't going to do it. Like, we couldn't sit in that line. We didn't know if the gas stations that these people are waiting in have gas.
Right.
So we just move on. We see another one. It was in Zirconia, and didn't have power, didn't have gas, but they were doing cash transactions. And Kurt was dying for coffee at this point because he'd been like 2 days without. So he had a couple of bucks, got some coffee. We talked to some folks there. They gave us a little bit more advice, and they thought, if you keep going towards Greenville, you should be able to find something. But nobody knew if Greenville had power or anything.
Yeah.
So we kept going south. We hit Travelers Rest, and it was like, an oasis. You see not just a gas station sign, but a gas station sign with numbers on it. And it's like, whoa, I haven't seen this
Right.
in a day and a half. And so we got in that line, and we moved through feeling good. And then, 2-3 cars in front of me, I see a guy pull like the gas handle, and he tries to pump, and he's just like kind of like pressing the handle, nothing.
Ugh.
And he's like, I don't know. So he moves up. The other guy moves up. I try it. It didn't work. I was like, Kurt, you think I should try like mid-grade? And he's like, I might as well. So I do that, and it starts flowing. And I'm like, whew,
Yeah.
all right, like now I feel good. And I mean, we're still at this point, and we're not even at Greenville, South Carolina yet, trying to get back to Raleigh. Like
Right.
that's not an exactly easy trip, but
Yeah.
it was the break that I needed to like be able to take that breath and feel like, all right, the main roads are clear. Gas was my biggest thing. We can get home.
Right. All right. And so since then, obviously, had the weekend to rest. And on Monday, you were kind of looking into this cell phone service breakdown that affected you guys so much and is continuing to affect people. What have you learned about why that fell apart so fully?
Yeah. And one caveat of that, not being able to communicate with work is one thing. Not being able to hear from your loved ones is an entirely different issue
100%.
and something that, I wouldn't wish on anybody. And there's a lot of anger coming out of the area because of that. It's something we all are dependent on and have grown to, expect to work. And, even the Canton mayor, he has had a lot of harsh things to say about what this is doing to their community. And based off what we have learned so far, I spoke with one of our engineers about this, actually. He went through Florence, and that was a situation. I wasn't here, so please, you correct me if I get this wrong. But, Florence, as bad as it was, communication was still there.
Right.
Power was out, but cell phones worked.
Right.
And, from what he tells me, it was that, as bad as the flooding and the outages were, they had backup generators that weren't affected. The theory right now is that these waters rose so high so quickly, we're not talking, window level, door level, even like the tops of canopies. Like, this is roof level water, 20 feet high in some places, that the generators had no chance, that they were in a position that they should be operating, but generators aren't going to work in water. And the theory right now from our engineer that I spoke to is just that, as well prepared as they could have been, nobody could be prepared for how bad this was.
Right. And of course, still being worked through. And we have crews that are out there. You mentioned Starlink. We're trying that now. So, which
I hear is working, fantastically. And, that's a positive for us to be able to keep people informed. But, I've seen there are crews trying to get Starlink out there for the people. And, I hope people know us getting video back and stories back. While I do think that's important, it's most important to make sure people can find out that their loved ones are okay and learn about what's going on there. And, I've seen T-Mobile, Verizon are sending out, like mobile hotspot units to be able to help as well. But, it's hard to ask people to be patient when you have no idea what your family's been going to for 3-4 days at this point. So it's hard to ask for patience, but it's happening. Every day things are getting better.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Shaun. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.